What could this possibly be? Just look at the length of the thing.
I could just about get it in.
You pretty much need a wide angle lens to even get that in. Just check that out. Although it's not actually labeled as Sephiroth's sword. It's just labeled as nodachi.
That might just be trademarked.
Maybe, I don't know. Just the sheer length of it, I don't even know.
It's like a two-person sword.
I mean, I'm not a particularly tall guy by any means, but this is, my goodness, can you even draw that thing?
Draw? There's no way I have a chance to draw this. My arms are not long enough.
That's a yeah, like you said, that's a two-person sword. It's just, what even is happening? The blade comes into frame half a minute before you do. I can't even do anything with this in here. It's so long. This is a long lever for the opponent to use against you. If someone binds up here, I can't even reach that. It's so easy for them to just push it down and you've got nothing to hold against it. It's crazy. Yeah, this is too long. This is dramatically too long. Like, even with super strength, you would struggle to prevent an opponent from just pushing it down with their blade because they have way superior leverage, right? I mean, also, because of that, it's wobbly. I don't want to do it too much. I literally cannot sheath this. My arms are not long enough. I got it. Okay. I managed to sheath it. Holy hell.
This is the battle-ready Sephiroth Masamune from Final Fantasy. It is scaled down.
Like a lot?
It is scaled down. Sephiroth Masamune is normally supposed to be like a 7-foot sword.
Yeah.
This is 142 centimeters.
Much more reasonable.
Yeah, it had to be scaled down. Real life swords have physics restrictions, as you can imagine. Can we talk about that for a second?
Sure.
How a 7-foot sword would not function in real life. Just because each inch you add beyond this length will weaken the integrity of the blade.
Yes, I've handled a decorative version of it that was more like real size, more or less. It was
Like
very, very long, and you can tell when you just hold it, it just starts to sag and just flops around.
Okay.
The blade just gets too flexible at that length, and what are you going to do with that? So this is like a nodachi, so this is much more reasonable. This is how they're supposed to be. So that's actually a proper length to use in a fight where, I mean, here obviously I have to be careful. This is perfectly fine. Balance is fine. And there comes a point where all that extra length doesn't really benefit you all that much because typically there's a sweet spot on blades, so depending on the blade shape and type and everything, it might be higher or lower. So sometimes you have a blade that has quite a bit of extra length, but then it tapers so much that you can't even really cut with that part. In this case, it's not really an issue with a katana or nodachi blade. They're pretty rigid all throughout, so you can cut fairly high up, so that's not a problem. You could make it longer, you could make it about the height of the person.
There's a Chinese expression, 1 inch longer means 1 inch stronger, which I know can be really dirty sounding, but get your mind out of the gutter. That has to do with reach and in a battlefield combat situation. But yeah, it takes incredible strength to be able to wield something longer than this. I know that I train with swords. I have more of a Kung Fu Wushu background, but wielding something of this length requires a lot of upper body strength that personally, someone like me, I do not have. So I usually stick to something much shorter, but I can only imagine how strong you need to be even be able to swing a 7-foot Sephiroth Masamune for an extended period of time.
And that's the thing, Sephiroth has superhuman strength, but strength alone only gets you so far. If you're strong enough, but you get stuck on things, you can't even move around with it, it just gets in the way so much, it's a problem. And as I said, the leverage working against you. There's a reason why when you defend, you block about the halfway point of the blade, usually lower, just because if you try to do it here, it's just going to blow through. There's just not enough you're not really going to be able to hold against it, and the leverage works against you.
Can I also point out, actually, well, I guess when you're drawing out your sword, your initial position of your stance, I really appreciate that you had a strong, stable stance to be able to, unsheath nodachi like the Sephiroth sword in a safe way. So safety is paramount. It's very, very important. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's always good to be mindful of the direction. You can't just,
Yeah.
yank it out and bonk into someone or shove the hilt in someone's face or what have you, particularly when you don't have much space, which of course is also an issue here. Like if it's this long, like I have to really kind of pull my body back a little bit and then just clear the tip and then tilt it down to be able to do that safely. Otherwise, it's tricky.
Oh, so another thing I wanted to really point out too is that at a lot of these sword experts that we always talk, I say this in quotations for a reason, a lot of the sword experts are not experts that we talk to. I just wanted to point out the way you're unsheathing it by pushing it with your thumb and its blade, the belly of the blade is upward. That's the correct way to unsheath a sword of this nature.
Yeah, it's not my specialty, this kind of sword, but I know at least the basics of that. So yeah, this is much more functional than it normally would be. It's not the big difference, right? It's just the...
It's the amount of steel inside the blade. So someone would buy something like this. Someone would buy something like this if they're not quite ready. Let's just say they are of age to buy a sword, but they're not quite ready for a battle-ready blade. This is what they would buy. It's more for display. It's more for like if you wanted to swing it in the air. It's not made for actual impact, and you can tell too.
It's lighter. It's noticeably lighter than the other one.
Yeah, and you can tell with the thickness of the blade, the fittings. It's not at the heavy-duty quality that you saw in the battle-ready blade.
It's one of the typical things that people tend to do if they are not very experienced and they practice with that. Because the hand is here, it happens all too often that someone slices their thumb or whatever. So this is one of those cases where you normally do this, but if you haven't practiced and it's a sharp one, maybe don't do that. Or just be very careful and just keep the thumb out of the way, make sure that you're not doing this number, right?
So now we're starting to get into the foam items that we carry. We carry stuff of all different qualities, whether it be foam, resin, steel, or like high carbon steel for the battle ready stuff. So this is one of our foam pieces that are more used for like costuming, outdoor use, public use. It is a smaller size. It's more for maybe children or like youth. The full-size version is, oh man, isn't it taller than you? I think.
Hardedge is pretty much the same as the Buster sword, right?
Yeah, all of Cloud's items are like taller than both of us.
So yeah, this would be way larger. Now, this would actually be more usable, funnily enough, of course. This would be, I guess, 10.5, kind of.
Wait.
Or single-handed.
Sorry to interrupt. I realize I shouldn't do that when you're recording. I'm just getting excited now talking to someone like yourself. This one's small. We can give him the metal Buster sword, which is slightly bigger. It's still not like our size. But yeah, we wanted to, a lot of our stuff, we wanted to make it so that it's durable, so that it won't just break apart on people. The concern with the Sephiroth swords is the transportation issues. So that's the thing. We have to deal with a lot of real world constraints. Weight and transportation issues, the oversized nature of the Buster sword, it's very, very difficult to ship and transport.
Funnily enough, also closer to things you would find in history. There are swords like this in parts of Africa that are this sort of shape. I mean, a little bit different. This is more flat on top. There are original swords that are curved. It's kind of like a fishtail.
Yep.
They would be smaller than this, but not terribly far off.
African blades are crazy. What's your thoughts on things like Hunga Munga and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, those are crazy. This throwing knife with all the different blades.
Yeah, it's like a throwing star, but wacky, a wacky throwing star.
I do have to wonder how well they fly, like aerodynamics-wise and all that. I have no idea.
I've meant to make a replica of the ones from Black Panther so that we could test one. I would like to test that. That would be one of my.
Great, yeah. With a lot of swords, like I mentioned already, you can't really hit all that far up. Here, well, it widens, it doesn't taper. So imagine hitting with this corner. Yikes. That'll concentrate a lot of force. So that would definitely work. Now, of course, the usual bane of my existence, round handles. It's pretty common, of course, because the original is designed like that. So that I feel like with this, it's less of an issue. And there are historical swords with round handles, I should point that out. But in this case, I feel like because it flares out so much, you can kind of feel it a little bit better. You can feel how the edge is aligned, where with some round handles you wouldn't really be able to. But this is actually not bad. I can kind of feel how it's oriented. For a real life one, I would probably make this a little bit narrower. I mean, I did test a real version of the Armor Slayer from Fire Emblem, and that thing was clunky. I think it was still possible to handle it, but it was a lot. So generally, you're better off making it a bit narrower or thinner. But of course, at some point, you run into trouble there too. It's still doable. It would just be pretty heavy if you made it out of steel, even at this size, let alone his original size, which is just. But hey, he has superhuman strength, so there's that.
I wish I could hold a real steel version of that because I can only imagine the weight.
That's the other thing too with video game swords. They're often so thick, so that makes it even worse. If you made it, just the size overall in reasonably thin steel, it would still be a clunker. But then in the game, it looks like they're who knows how thick. So there's the big one.
Yes.
Oh boy, this is so downscaled and it's already ridiculous.
We decided to test how this would cut despite not being sharpened. This is a blunt blade, so I'm just gonna that's a blunt blade, but we wanted to see how would this cut through like a watermelon and pumpkin. And we just simply dropped it and it just cleaved right through, just from the weight alone.
It'll do that, yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, please don't do that with these blades, please be safe. But we obviously had a controlled environment here and we needed to do it just for science. For science,
I respect that.
For science sake, we needed to get it done. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
So I don't have the space to do Cloud's sword twirl over his head.
I
could totally do it. No. Yeah, I mean, even just holding it out like this in a forward guard, that's a lot of weight that's pulling on you.
Some people, when they hold this, they forget about the physics involved in holding swords. You're holding it at the end, so it will always feel heavier than what it actually weighs. So, because you're holding something at the very end of your arm. So this involves the concept of torque, and it's just like holding a snow shovel that's full of snow at the end, right? So that's why if I were to hold it right now and estimate the weight, I would give you a much heavier weight than it probably is. Yeah. That's one of the inherent problems with a sword like this.
It's hard to say.
Okay, 5.6 kilograms, 12 pounds.
It does feel heavier for sure.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It does. So. Like if you hold it like this, that's. Yeah, I mean you can tell it's heavy, but as soon as you hold it out, it's pulling on you substantially, and there's just so much extra weight here because this is a thick block of metal, right? So that adds quite a bit, and you can say, well, it pulls the balance further down, right? Yeah, it does a little bit, but that's still extra weight that you have to hold. So how much does that help? For a normal person, not so much, but Cloud, of course, it's not really a problem. Now, I do always have to wonder the kind of force needed to swing this at the speed that he does. What other things does that do? Physics become interesting with this kind of mass and everything. I've talked about that in a video like back in 2014 or so, I think, about how he might just be pulled off his feet despite his strength, just because, even if you get it going, you have to kind of anchor yourself in the ground. I don't know, if you take like a really wide stance and you try to really drive your feet into the ground, maybe. I feel like this wouldn't work here. If the floor's too smooth and slippery, I think you would just fly.
One of the funniest things I get asked all the time by customers is, what is the most practical anime sword? And I look at them and I laugh and I'm like, no anime sword. Basically no anime sword. Well, unless you're talking about like something like a simplified katana. And don't get me wrong, I love Final Fantasy and I love Square Enix. I'm a huge fan of the games and anime and all the, in general and all the series. But yeah, sometimes when I look at a design like this.
Can I even get this in the frame all the way? Probably not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, just about. Aha.
The next item you asked for is Vincent's gun. The nice thing about working at a company like this is that we can update the models as per customers' suggestions. So fun fact, the first edition model of this is right behind us. Since updated the model as per customer suggestions. If we were to do this one more time though, I would point out that someone has pointed out that it's missing the chain and I was gonna say jam,
charm.
It's not the charm, thank you. Each of these guns come with a stand. They do not fire. They're simply for display and costuming purposes.
Actually kind of funny to see this in person. So everybody always focuses on the Buster sword or how heavy it is. Imagine holding this thing out. That would also be quite heavy. I mean, it's 3 barrels. So that made of steel would be hefty. I actually like the shape. The grip is quite comfortable and it points naturally. So that's not bad at all, actually. And I like all the detail. Now it's kind of interesting that the wolf's head there forms the front sight. So aiming with that basically doesn't work, but I guess he probably aims instinctively, just point and shoot, which is pretty common with a lot of firearms in fantasy and all that.
This goes beyond the scope of my knowledge. I do not profess to be a gun expert whatsoever. Can I get your take on the practical purposes for why someone would have a triple-barreled gun like this?
Now, I can't remember in the game. In fact, I don't even remember seeing specs about it in the game overall, but the way this is shaped, it looks like those are 3 separate cylinders. So each cylinder could have up to 6 rounds. Even with a prop, I hate pointing it in the direction of people. It's just gun safety. But those are some massive bores. It looks like you would only fit maybe 3 into each cylinder. I mean, that still means you have 9.
The barrels seem huge, but apparently that's deceptive. The concept art shows that each cylinder has 6 chambers. So eyeballing the diameter, I would guess that's only something like 357 Magnum, which is not all that powerful really. Looking at the barrels, I was guessing it would be at least the size of 45 long Colt, and then maybe 3 per cylinder. But as it turns out, it's 6 rounds each. 3x6 is quite some capacity for a revolver, but it fires all 3 barrels at once, so it's only 6 shots after all. Cerberus would be extremely heavy for a handgun, but I like the concept. It's badass.
I think you cover a really good point though. So once again, going back to the safety aspect when it comes to handling weapons, we usually tell people even when they're handling foam swords or something more decorative, we tell them treat it like it's a live blade, develop good habits. You want to have those habits in place for that day when you eventually do buy a live blade. You want to be as safe as possible, right?
Exactly. I'm going to make a conscious exception to that right now because I want to see.
Nice.
Oh, this is... no, can't dwell that. But I had to try. It's too big. You can't do that. But yeah, it's cool. It's a really cool prop. I mean, it's Vincent's gun. How can you argue with that, right? It's edgy. The good kind of edgy.
Is there a bad kind of edgy?
Yes. Try hard neckbeard edgy is bad.
Okay.
I see a lot of that.
Don't be an edgy neckbeard. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Yeah, that's how it works. Thanks for watching.